Hello, everybody. Good morning. I just wanted to upload a little video to make some notes about turning in certain items through Schoology. If we go to our class here, and let's take a look at, thank you so much of you for responding to the event that's today at 7:30. We were advised to show up at least 15 minutes early, so please show up about 7:15 if you're coming tonight. The live doc for the first one, thank you so much to everybody who posted it. I have a few PDFs here, that is totally fine. You can also, and this works really well, upload a public link that way. See, in this case, I can't access it, but I do think Elena was successful in eventually uploading a link that worked or not. So if you're still seeing some zeros in the grade book, please take advantage of the opportunity to set a link public, and perhaps we can take a look at how to do that. So if I go to, let's see if I type in live doc one here. So yeah, so here's the master copy of one of the live docs. And so if I can go into the search bar here, go to file, let's see, I want to create and share a copy. So you would have already, so many of you probably did this, but make a copy to save it to your own drive. It looks like this is somebody else's version of it. So this is somebody else's property here. I wouldn't obviously try and turn this in. But then, you know, if you want to share it, you turn on the link sharing, make sure that they can edit it, get a shareable link. It should be anyone with a link can view. So that link makes it publicly available to anybody who has that link. So if you go and post it back to Schoology, it should be available to us. All right, so let's go back into the current unit. I am getting a lot of work in today as it is Friday, and I know that there is so much work that is to be submitted on a Friday. So please communicate to me if you're having issues or problems with the amount of content. I kind of designed it so, say this were a 4-hour class that were 6 weeks long, I would assume that the work would take about 90 minutes per day to complete. That's my particular opinion about this. You really have to stay motivated. You have to complete the work as it comes in and follow this schedule that I'm about to upload right now, which I've also sent to you through Schoology message. If you should by now have the textbook, but here's a link to it. And so that sample schedule is here if you want to use it to keep track with the assignments. So by now you should be about complete with the Christianity unit. All right? So then I also want to go back to our class here too and talk about some of the material. As far as the Judaism content goes, hopefully you were able to access this and complete the view and do in the module in the live doc. All right, so by now you should understand the difference between an orthodoxy and an orthopraxis. Judaism is a lived religion. It's a lived sacred act. It's about actions, about doing things, about following the law. It is about separating the profane and sacred and affirming the sacredness of certain acts or certain previously maybe considered ordinary processes in life and giving them a hint of sacred purpose. So if you take the sacredness of time, the sacredness of certain materiality, they're very concerned with the material order of things, processes in this world. So Orthodox Judaism, yes, it is beholden to a specific and a stringent way of life and belief system, but it's just as much or more about strict practice. And so that's where the orthopraxis comes from. You can't talk about Jewish history without talking about a history of Jewish persecution. Still to this day, I have students that seem to have a little hint of hostility in the regard towards Jewish people for the slightly misunderstood culpability that they think they hold for executing Christ. Remember, the plan for our salvation was set into stone with the very first sin of Adam and Eve and the dismissal of humanity from the garden, that primordial sense of union with God, which we have been continually trying to recover from. That's what set the stage for Christ to be crucified in the way that he was. And if there's any model for unjust suffering, perhaps it's the Jewish people themselves that continue to live out and suffer from this sort of persecution. But they're just one of many or several groups in our world today that experience unjust persecution in the same way that the peasant class in ancient Israel experienced a certain kind of persecution from the Roman Empire. So anyway, as we keep going here, history is incredibly important to the Jewish people because they believe that God has been directly involved in their relationship to time and their own history. So you have the book of Matthew continuing into Christianity that has an entire lineage going back to the earliest human beings and the patriarchs of the Hebrew Testament, and that is very important to the Jewish people and continues to be important, more or less so depending on the sect that you are looking at particularly. If anyone has been to Brooklyn or been to the hipster neighborhood of Williamsburg, you will see hundreds of Hasidic Jewish people walking around the neighborhood there. Hi. Thanks, Ma. Appreciate that. Paycheck. So anyway, hopefully you've gone through these and are learning some interesting and meaningful things about the Jewish faith. I love this video here. If you see, this is from Mayim Bialik's channel, I believe, or a friend of hers in New York City. This woman is an Orthodox Jewish person, and she does not seem like she's somebody that is confined in her way of life. She seems almost more liberated than some women in American society that live a more liberal or free way of life. She seems very proud of who she is. And that's just to defend her way of life. Of course, most of us would take a look at Orthodox Judaism and think of it as being too patriarchal and too limiting of the female role in the faith. But if you take a deeper look, and as she mentions, many Orthodox Jewish women are very successful, very powerful professionals, doctors, lawyers, therapists. All of those things need to be taken into consideration. And, somehow we seem to want to pity sometimes Orthodox practitioners because we don't see their way of life as being affirming of so many of the values that we hold to be dear, that prioritize freedom. And that comes with a cost. Prioritizing freedom over all other things doesn't necessarily lend itself towards a more sustainable way of life. Because so often people don't act in a way that it suits their best interests. So a lot of orthodoxy or more restricted ways of life that are built into these belief systems is not necessarily about control, which is what materialists would say, if you're going back to the theories that we looked at in the first unit, but actually about out of love for self and God and the created world, I act in a way that is virtuous, that is more aligned with perhaps what God desires from me. And so historically, we have learned the ways that we can act in accordance with what God wants for me. And some people take a very strict interpretation of that, literally from whatever text you're looking at. Some people have a very liberal perspective on that. and understand that the content or interpretations of the content contained within religious texts needs to change with time, because time is changing and the needs of the people are changing. And that's where you have that tension that we're experiencing right now, that has to do with the rights of the LGBT community, or has to do with the rights of females. And you can kind of understand that the importance of the Procreative Act makes it like doctrinal necessity to take a stand on issues concerning procreation, regardless of what your perspective is about this. And as a man, I have a lot of personal, internal conflict with making statements, or the church making statements about what a woman should do with her body, because 99% of the Vatican is male. And so you're having a very restrictive population, like a very limited population, make these stipulations for an entire community of women seems a little bit inappropriate. That said, we can understand why they take that stance. Okay, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed my Bialik talking about Orthodox Judaism. She is a scientist. She's a very faithful person. I absolutely loved what she had to say about the impact of faith on her own beliefs and her relationship to the natural world. It definitely seems like it enhances rather than limits her worldview, which I think is, when you get into these belief systems and the people that practice them authentically, that's what it does. I mean, if you're thoughtfully practicing these faiths and not kind of putting on the blindfolds and becoming an automaton and just participating without thinking about it, which I'm sure some people do. I know people that are like that. Maybe you do too. And that's maybe what turns people off to the faith, because they see that kind of disingenuous sort of practice. She's not like that. And once she makes a whole career trying to defend her faith or speak about it to the entire world. Okay, so I just want to continue on here. The messianic theme that we experience and our understanding comes out of Judaism is I don't know, it's not as well understood, I think. Like a messianic age, I think, is what we see here is something that, like, it doesn't necessarily need to be a warrior, right? It can be a time and place, a period of time, a state of being where we're, reaching that state of salvation, where, an anointed king might be not a single man, but a group of people or a way of being. And a lot of modern Jewish people see continuity between what is here and there, so that heaven is not necessarily something outside of what we are experiencing here, but somehow they're connected. And so a heaven on earth might be something that we should seek. And certainly one would think that life as we know it being stored here on earth, human memory, the collective body of human knowledge as we know it is stored here on this planet. So why not we want to preserve what we know to be alive and well and supporting earth, the only life as we know it in the entire universe? Wouldn't it be deeply connected? Perhaps we should continue to seek, more heavenly type experiences in this world. Okay, so enough about this. Perhaps we can talk more about it later. So this is one slideshow. Hopefully you've also gone in and taken a look at the Christianity slideshow. I just want to take one note about apocalypticism. I love that word. It's a fun word to say. Once you've got your head around it and you figured it out, you can just say it without thinking about it too much. But apocalypticism has to do with when you convince a group of people that the world is about to end, emotionally, they run kind of wild. And who can blame them? If your whole world is about kind of doom and you're locked in to a status within the society that is lowly, how do you maintain a belief in God? How do you maintain a belief in God that is meaningful to you when you feel like God maybe isn't supporting your way of life? Well, you project out from this world to another world where you will be redeemed.